we're going to start a YouTube live stream, and this is just for recording purposes, so it'll be popped up on YouTube later. You're welcome to give your talk and share your screen or whatever you need to do. And then afterwards, we'll just end the stream, and it'll be up on YouTube afterwards.
Okay. And there's going to be questions and everything else, and
Yeah.
hopefully. Yeah. Oh, good. All right. So let's share my screen here. Maybe.
It's streaming on YouTube. I'm going to record locally as well.
All righty. So I'm Mark McDermott. I'm a professor of practice at the University of Texas and an EIR, which means entrepreneur in residence. And one of my goals there is to help faculty and students, spin companies out of here. I've actually spun one company out of here, and I'm still involved in it. And I find it quite enjoyable to help students get companies started. I do like a lot of questions, so please jump in, ask questions at any time. And let's see. All right. So there's two types of entrepreneurship. And I've got to clean up the screen here real bit. Okay. Those are there's two. The key one is the technology users. These are folks that see technology that's been out in the market, and they apply it differently. They mix it with other technology, and then they come up with new ideas, maybe to create a market or to meet a market need. And the challenge of creating markets is that you sometimes have to have a lot of money to do that. But there are cases where you'll create a new market by just mashing a bunch of technology together, and seen this a lot in the software area. The other entrepreneurs in this that are doing cool stuff are the developers that are developing technology, and they will go out and develop or fund unique technology that is they may need for their own business. And what that means is they're looking to do something that is creative. They've got a little bit of funding. Maybe they need to tweak a particular something or other piece of technology, and then they get something new out of it. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in the form of internal and external entrepreneurship. Any questions as I go on? And let me get this out of the way. All right. So we have this idea of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. How many folks have heard of entrepreneurship out there? Anybody? So let's go through both of these. Entrepreneur is what you think. They create, control a new venture, and they provide some economic value for themselves, but also the stakeholders, shareholders, the customers, and what have you. Entrepreneurship is exactly the same thing. It creates new opportunities inside an existing organization. And what that means is that they're in a big company, and the company may have a venture capital firm that is, that likes to, invest in new ideas, most of the time from outside, but they will sponsor an entrepreneur inside the company to go start something. Now, Cisco used to do this. They would spin a company out of Cisco into their own little entity, and there was a couple of reasons for that, but primarily to get it away from the mothership, but then also fund it specially in a special way, so that the people that took a risk to move into this kind of outside company, when they spun them back in, would get some kind of benefit out of it. And so of course there's a lot of reasons that people did that. One, they wanted to do a startup, but they wanted to have, some technology or something that had been invented inside the company. They wanted to use it. And the company said, yes, let's go do it. And so they'd spin out. And then later on, when they spun back in, they'd spin the company back in at market rates, which meant that the company they spun out could actually try to sell themselves to somebody else. And so it created kind of a bidding war of sorts, but it helped the inventors quite a bit. Oops. So here's the list of the top 6 characteristics of an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur. And so you can see that, hang on, I'm trying to clean up my screen here a little bit. The entrepreneur wants to be independent. The intrapreneur wants to be recognized. Guess what? They're both optimistic. They both think that there's something to be, to be done. And so they want to go do it in their own little sandbox. The nice thing about being optimistic for both of these entrepreneurs is that, they don't take no for an answer. They push hard, they try to make things happen. And inside of a company, that's exceptionally important because you've got to convince the company that they want to go get into maybe another marketplace. And so you got to continue to be optimistic. You got to be hard driving, action oriented, and go to all sorts of people in the company and convince them, hey, this is a great idea. On the other hand, the entrepreneur has to do the same thing with the venture capital community. And so the venture capital community is just as rugged and rigid about things as the company. Now, I'd say the entrepreneur is probably more of a risk taker than the intrapreneur. But that said, the entrepreneur is maybe risking his job, which can be you can end up on the street and not have a job after making a big mistake of some kind. So, but that's all right. You have to take risk. If you don't take risk, then you're not gonna get ahead. Now, the entrepreneur obviously is going to worry about access to external resources of some kind. The entrepreneur probably has all the internal resources, maybe needs a few, but more than likely he's got most of the internal resources. Now, one thing he may not have is he may not have a complete team. So the entrepreneur may have to build a team from scratch, just like the entrepreneur does, but it's a little bit more critical because you'll have to build it from inside of the organization, but maybe from outside of the organization. And I'm going to tell you about an example of that in a minute. And then the entrepreneur, obviously, they're the founder of the company or whatever. They have to be trusted and they got to be very strong and what have you. And it doesn't say they don't have to be a good team builder, but so let me talk about entrepreneur. So in 1998, Intel came to me and asked me to start a company inside of Intel. And so this is not a company, it was a design center, but it was intended to be a entity that was kind of away from everything. And we had some special goals and stuff associated with it, but it was a green field, and a green field just means that you get to start from scratch. And so I went about building a team from folks inside of Intel and from outside. And so it was a good mix of both. And that Intel site is still here in Austin, down there on Mopac. And I started that in 1998. And the thing that we ended up with because of all that is we had a charter, was a good name for it, to do something that nobody else in the company was doing. And so we weren't getting in the way of anybody else's business. And people have heard this lecture before, I call them the white corpuscles. None of the white corpuscles came out and got me right away, which is good. So let me stop there. Any questions? Everybody's kind of quiet.
I have a quick question, actually. Just to clarify the definition of an intrapreneur. So is it just somebody who, gathers a couple people in the company and maybe like makes a new team, or does it actually require that they make like a sub company almost, or like their own small company to do a completely different venture? Or does it not matter? Is it like either one?
Well, generally, you want to approach this as if you're building a real company.
I see.
And because you're going to have to go through all of the funding, funding gates and everything else that we normally would do in a regular startup. got to do this, you got to have this ready, you got to do a pitch, you got to, all those things that it takes to get the funding to go start a project.
I see.
So I always approach it as if it's a startup. Just it's a startup inside of a big company. And when you do that, that it's just you check all the check boxes, and they're the same check boxes that the venture capital want to see.
Okay. And so they also go to venture capitalists for funding.
Who's that?
The entrepreneurs.
No, the entrepreneurs, they can, but more than likely the company has a venture capital firm, like Intel Capital invests in a lot of operations. And so they're taking some of their money and investing it in startups. And so you can go to Intel Capital inside of Intel if you want.
I see. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So technical entrepreneurs do a number of things. They capitalize on technological changes that are going on, and they're aware of the technology that's coming up and what impact it's going to have, and then they try to capitalize on it. And I like to ask a question: does anybody know a certain technology that we have today that everybody's trying to capitalize on? Like 80-something companies.
Blockchain, maybe.
Yeah, blockchain's good. How about machine learning?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
yeah. There's a lot. And I'm actually an advisor to 2 of those machine learning companies. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Someone in the chat says NFTs as well.
Oh yeah, right. And so they're seeing the technology, and then they're figuring out, well, how can I apply it? And generally, they're looking at it mostly at a national level, but sometimes regional. But then, of course, if they're lucky, it becomes worldwide. So they also create new resource combinations. And so I'm kind of hinted at this early, where they look at some existing technology and some new technology, and they swizzle it together and try to make something more innovative out of it. And maybe it's a lot of stuff. Maybe it's things that you wouldn't think you'd ever put together. But if they build a system out of it, and most of what we build nowadays are systems, then they'll put together a very commercially viable entity because of that. And then they, it says here they spot and identify opportunities, and that's pretty much this the ability to capitalize. The big difference about a technical entrepreneur is that they are techies. And so they use their technical skill sets to create a kind of an advantage over a lot of other startups. And in this era of a lot of technical startups, you really do need techies involved at the very top of the organization. I'm in another startup, the one we spun out of UT many years ago. I'm actually not advisor. I'm actually designing chips for them. The CEO was actually a professor here, and he's now the CEO, and he's super techie and understands everything, the technology. This is sometimes unsettling for the venture capitalist, but they like to see technical entrepreneurs that are kind of broad like that. And you have to, kind of change some of the way you think when you become a techie CEO, and that doesn't always happen. So, but if it does, then it's the best for the company, it's best for the venture capitalist, and for the customer. Questions? All right. So one of the things that a technical entrepreneur has to do is really manage technology. If we're there to utilize technology, then we have to know how to manage it. And so there's this kind of thinking of, well, I'll go out and develop some new technology. Well, it's going to be very expensive potentially. You're throwing away money that you could be putting on in your product, especially if you're kind of slightly funded at the time. And you may end up with technology that you thought you needed, but it wasn't what you really wanted. Or even worse, and this happens in a lot of cases, is the technology just wasn't ready for your product, and you run out of money, and then the technology shows up a couple years later and somebody else capitalizes on it, and away they go. At the other end of the spectrum, though, you have existing technology, and we talked about that a little earlier in the slides. That's where you find an existing technology and go do something with it. Nice thing about it is, of course, it's cheaper. It's been used in a lot of other products, potentially. And so it's, kind of hardened is the way we put it, that, you're not going to have too many technology issues at the end of the day, except for one, and that is you may end of life the product. It may end of life itself before your product makes any money. And what that means is that, technology has a lifetime. It's there for a while, and you'll notice that, you'll be working on something like, some of these little nanos and stuff like that, and you want to go buy another one and it's gone. There's a new nano out there for you or something. And this happens a lot. And so when you make this commitment to some existing technology, this is when you're going to have to manage it very carefully, especially if you think it might end a life on you. And there's cases where you just go out and maybe you buy the artwork from somebody and go ahead and build your own boards and get your own software or do whatever you have to do. And that's happened to a lot of startups that use existing technology, especially late in its life cycle. Does that make sense? Questions? Anybody?
Are there any major examples of like things that have failed because they were kind of too late for end of life?
Let me see if I can think of some. Can't think of anything right off the top of my head. I don't know, maybe somebody else out there might think of something where technology is supposed to be ready and it wasn't. I don't know. That's a good question. I know that I remember way back when Sony was pushing something that I don't know if it was a technology problem running out of life, but it was, they might have been pushing, may have been more of a new technology they were trying to do and it wasn't ready. But no, I guess I don't know of any, but it's a thing you have to worry about. Okay, as a technical entrepreneur, because it happens all the time. And the problem, of course, is that, the new silicon or whatever that comes out is much cheaper. So the company is kind of obligated to end of life that old product and maybe get you to move on. And if you can, then, then you're lucky at that point. Yeah. All right. No more questions? All right. Okay. So one of the things you have to remember is that creating an innovative technology does not necessarily lead to the creation of a new business opportunity. There's a lot of innovative technology out there that has absolutely no marketplace. And one of the things that as engineers, we sometimes, look at a technology and then try to envision a market for it, especially if we're creating it ourselves. It's our baby. And in some cases, you're better off just, writing a few papers and, maybe letting it go and, calling it a day. So I encourage technical entrepreneurs, do not chase innovative technology and think it's going to create a business for you. It generally does not. Now, somewhere down the road, it might. And that kind of leads into this next piece here. And I want people to understand this is kind of important. There is a whole lot of technology, innovative technology, still sitting on the shelves in universities and businesses and stuff. And I say wasting away because fundamentally they are. And people have started companies here in the last 10 years to go through and talk to these technology commercialization arms of the universities to get an idea what they have on their shelves and see if somebody can use it for maybe their new product. And so So rather than go invent new technology, you should also go look for what's sitting around waiting to be used. Now there's an issue, and it's a big issue, and it's probably more of an issue with university technology than maybe business technology. And that is that there's a big chasm between the technology being fresh out of design and being really ready for a product. And so what you may end up doing or having to do is take this technology that you get from university and then put a lot more money into it to make it a product. So I got a story about that. So quite a few years ago now, we were building it was new architecture here at UT. It was called TRIPS. And one of my job on the team was to try and figure out how to commercialize it. And what we figured out was that the technology was great, but we were $30 or $40 million away from the technology really being usable. And so when we talked to customers about using it, they would kind of roll their eyes and say, well, geez, it's not ready for prime time, and we don't want to take that on, and what have you. And so we went to DARPA. It was a DARPA funded project, and thought, well, maybe we can get DARPA to fund it. And DARPA sort of said yes. And then there was a change in presidency, and then DARPA said no, and a lot of anyways. But it was kind of eye-opening, because there was about $30 or $40 million poured into it, and it was a long ways away from being ready. So, but that said, you still should, as an entrepreneur, technical entrepreneur, go look down these rabbit holes here, looking for some technology. There may be something really interesting there. Has anybody online ever looked into this kind of stuff, into the technology? Yeah. So, just something to think about. All right. So I want to spend this is my last slide, but what I want to do is I want to chat about these things here. I call them challenges and opportunities for the technical entrepreneur. And so this is where I really want some participation from the audience. Okay. So the biggest thing, and this is almost to me, it's an order of what you really need to do. The biggest thing is coming up with an idea, a product idea. And is anybody in the audience know about my technical entrepreneurship class or taken it? I don't know if anybody has, but probably not. But one of the things I tell my class is that what you want to find out is what are people willing to pay money for? Because really that's what it is. You've got to find a product that people are willing to pay for. And I always contend that finding a product that makes humans more productive is probably not what people want to spend money on. They want to spend money on health. They want to spend money on pleasure. They want to spend money on security, things like that. So your challenge, especially as a technical entrepreneur, because you may not have all the skills that say somebody who's a marketer, who's in the marketing business has, but you should pair up with somebody that can help you figure out what that is. And the outcome of that, my expectation of that would be, well, one, you find a market, albeit it may be a niche market, and there's nothing wrong with niche markets. Niche markets generate a phenomenal amount of money, but for a very short time. So let me stop there. Any feedback on that? What do you think people will pay for? That's my question.
Not an app. I find that people are not willing to pay for apps when there's just free ones all over the place.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. There is this expectation. In fact, we did it to ourselves. We did it to ourselves in the silicon world many years ago, where the price of silicon kept going down as the number of transistors went up. And, it's kind of ludicrous. So the price per transistor is ridiculously small. Well, the app world is kind of doing it to themselves here too, Um, Anybody else?
I have a
Yeah.
question actually.
Yeah.
So 'cause Apple, I guess, is notorious for this, but they talk about how at least Steve Jobs' like biography talked about how he believed the consumer didn't know what they wanted. It was Apple's kind of job to tell them to push them in the direction, and they do stuff like get rid of like the aux cord, like the 3 millimeter audio jack and stuff like that. How do you think that fits in with the idea of trying to find something that people will like versus trying to push them in what you believe the consumer needs?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I kind of went kicking and screaming myself when some of this stuff was deprecated, and thought, God, I really like that old stuff. And then I actually warmed up to it after a while, and I worked for Steve Jobs, and so I know kind of his mindset. The guy was visionary, and he was way out there. He was probably looking out pretty far out where he was taking a big chance, but in a lot of cases he was right about what to do. But I don't know if that answered all your question, but the point is that sometimes you just have to go do that. You just have to go make find change the product, so that you're doing it inside. Change the product. It may not have a market now, but it eventually will. Now, one of the things that looks like it's going to get deprecated here pretty soon is the little bar across the top of the keyboard. And it was a great idea,
Yeah,
but it looks like it's gone, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Makes sense.
but you put those things out there, and then you see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the next challenge, and this kind of goes in this, like I said, this is in order. This is finding the right technology. And you got to be careful, because this is kind of one of those you can get in what's called analysis paralysis, where you're always looking for the right technology, and you can't find it because you're overanalyzing. And so you have to find the sweet spot between, okay, is it the absolute best technology, or is the technology I can use right now and get my product out, start making money, and I'll come back when the right technology shows up, or maybe I'll have enough money to tweak that technology for what I want, whatever. And you just got to be really, really careful of taking too much time doing this. It's I don't know if I could say it's killed a lot of companies, but it's killed a number who have just chased technology for the sake of it, near as I can tell. And then the VC finally gave up on them and said, "Nah, that's enough. You guys can all go home." And a lot of money went down the drain doing that. So, any comments on that? Anybody want to chat about that?
I'm just curious. Like, don't you also have to kind of tailor all of this to the VC as well, since they're providing your funding?
Yes and no. They're looking. So here's the deal. This kind of leads into the next line item here. The VC fund teams. They don't fund technology. And so when they bring you on, their expectation is that you'll find the right technology. That makes sense?
Yeah, but don't you usually kind of like pitch to them your idea and have to explain it? And they probably, if they don't like how it's planned out, then they might not fund you.
Oh, that's always the case. But I thought you were just talking about them making a technological decision for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I mean, I guess I misunderstood your question, but yeah, they'll some are pretty smart. Now, granted, I did this for Austin Ventures for a few years. Would go around and look at technology to figure out if it's worth investing in. So they always have folks on their staff that can do that. And by the way, sometimes you get some pretty good input from these advisors, and you may tweak your technology a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like I said, the VC fund teams. They're looking for teams. So let's talk about teams. This is, if I was to say anything that's probably the most important, is to find a team. that goes along with keeping the team. And in finding a team that has the stamina for doing a startup. And what that means is, that you have to give up some part of your life to go do this. And the VC are looking for you to do that. They want to see that you're completely invested in it. You don't have like a little side job, over someplace, doing some little consulting work and all that kind of stuff. They want to see you in there 24/7, 48/7, whatever, working on the stuff. Now, in this high-tech world, the reason I bring up this whole deal about keeping the team is that you'll get poached. You'll have your team members poached by another startup or something else, because everybody's always out looking for the A team. And when they hear about another A team somewhere, they'll come in and try and grab people from you. And, your job as, I guess maybe you're the CEO or just in general, you're going to have to worry about trying to keep your team. Now, the thing about teams, everybody has to understand is that most of your issues in your company are not going to be technology related. They are going to be all about the human capital that you have in your organization, and that's more of a psychology statement than anything. Because forming teams, there is no how to form a team kind of dummies book or something on how to build a team. And building teams is incredibly challenging. And I've only been in 2 teams in my entire life, and I've been in quite a number of places that in fact, to this day, we're all very, very close because we became a really hardworking, trusting team. We all worked hard, we trusted each other, and what have you. So, and the reason I bring this up is that technical entrepreneurs don't always figure out that that's a big deal. And so they, they'll just say, well, I need somebody to write this, I need a specialist in, I don't know, databases or something. I'll just go get somebody. Well, you'll wake up and that person may be poisoning your whole team, and you might have to get rid of them. And then you set yourself back by doing that, because now you got to go find somebody else. That makes sense? I'm going to harp a little bit on that because I want everybody to walk out of here thinking about teams also, not just technology. It looks like there's some, I apologize. I'm trying to I can't find my remote. my cursor here. Let me get rid of this pointer here. I wanted to see what's in the chat line. Is there anything else? Okay. Oh, somebody said a Google Glass. That's exactly right. That was that failed miserably, didn't it? It was just hurt early. It'll probably happen again. You wait. All right. So let's go back to the team. Anybody want to challenge me on this? Talk about it, please.
I see how I can definitely see how this would be like the hardest part of creating a company, right? But what I always see at startups, or at least the ones that I've interacted with, is that they still just have the standard apply with your resume and then do an interview or two and then, get accepted or something, right? Is there anything additionally that they could be doing to help ensure that the new member is, fits well with their team?
Yeah, the startups that come sometimes out of large companies know about this, but there's this technique called behavioral interviewing. And it's a very kind of, it's a little bit rugged of an interview to be behaviorally interviewed by somebody. And what they're looking for, they'll ask a lot of questions, and then they'll go in the back room afterwards and they'll map everything out to what your characteristics are as a person. And so they'll ask you questions like, well, what happened the last time you failed on a project? Those kind of things. How did you act? What happens if somebody does this? So they're asking you questions about how you deal with other humans. And so So it's not a technical interview. That's my point. And so you can just go Google behavioral interviewing, and there's a whole bunch of ways, techniques you can pick up from it. And they actually have real true training for it.
I see.
Has anybody heard of behavioral interviewing?
I'm somewhat familiar, like I've seen them now and then, but I thought it was just like a formality, kind of, where they were like, okay, let's do a behavioral interview so we learn more about you as a person.
Yeah.
But you're also trying to figure out if a person's going to work as a team member.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now, I told you I was going to harp a little bit longer on teams. One of the things that you have to watch out for when you build a team is that you want to have diversity. What that means is not the classical definition of diversity. What it means is that you all don't suffer from groupthink. And a lot of people will hire people that are like themselves, think like themselves. And so you get a whole organization all thinking like themselves, and it's not healthy for the organization. And so the nice thing about behavioral interviewing is that it helps you see, oh, wow, this guy has skills in this area that we don't have. Okay, that helps when we build out the team, we have folks in lots of different areas. We're very diverse in that sense. Right? Everybody understand that?
Yeah, I think I can kind of think of an example.
Okay.
There's a show called Silicon Valley, which I don't know if you've seen it. But they had a company of basically entirely engineers, and then they made a product that was so engineering heavy that nobody really wanted to use it because, but they didn't even realize because it was easy for them because like they were engineers, right? So I guess that's definitely an indication of why this groupthink.
Yes, absolutely. I should have brought that up earlier. That's a great movie. That is groupthink at the max for sure. Yeah, and it's very easy to fall into the groupthink kind of mentality if you're not careful, because you're comfortable around people that sort of act like you are you, but once you've been in a high performing team, you'll find out that the diversity in the team is very powerful. When you build things like these like a SEAL team or something like that, they want diversity in there. They want different types of thinkers in there, that think different in different situations and what have you. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you're talking about diverse teams, and that one thing that I thought might be a problem with also having a diverse team could be that it could complicate your decision-making process. But I know that's like the idea you're getting at, like by going against groupthink. But if you do have like a team that's very diverse and it's hard to like come up with a decision because of all these like ideas, how would you deal with something like that?
Well, Andy Grove called it disagree and commit. And so what it really meant was you want this diverse thinking, and the motivation for that is you want to have people play sort of the devil's advocate and question stuff. And out of that process will come hopefully a more a better product, right? Or better whatever. And at the end of the day, though, if you really felt strongly about it, but the rest of the team said we're going to go this way, then what disagree and commit means is that, well, I'm going to disagree with that, okay, but I understand we got to make this call. We're going to go do it, and I'm going to commit. And so that's the second piece of this, that part of a team, a good operating team, everybody practices disagree and commit. Because teams, this goes against the groupthink, we question everything. There's nothing wrong with that. But I talked about analysis paralysis earlier. You don't want to fall into that trap either.
How do you go about hiring like a team with diverse skills, like you said? Because I feel like if you don't think the same way as someone, you might just automatically not feel like they would make as good of a teammate, if that makes sense. So how do you overcome that?
Yeah. Well, what you're trying to do, when you build these teams is, one, you're looking to round out skills, obviously, but there's other parts. When you're a small company, a startup, you're looking for people that are tall and thin, and that means that yeah, they have the specialty in a certain area, but then you're looking for them to be able to move sideways and go help another team member and maybe do stuff. And so you want, on one hand, somebody to be an expert in an area, but then you also want them to have this ability to move around. And so one of the things, obviously you have to advertise, maybe whatever, but sometimes you go looking for them. And like I said, that people do that, and then you wake up and somebody poaches one of your guys, but maybe you poach somebody else, right? But you have to look for them, and there's all sorts of ways of doing that. And I go to conferences. I guess it's a little hard nowadays, but we used to go to conferences and then just go meet people, go talk to them, find out a little bit more about them. They get up there and they present, and you go, wow, this guy's the wizard. Well, let me see what he's like. Would he fit in a startup? Is he an A-team player? That kind of stuff. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Alrighty. So obviously you got to find venture capital, and venture capital is a challenge nowadays, especially in the hardware area. And so what they expect nowadays is that you come up with some minimum viable product of some kind, and you go back into it says finding more venture capital, right? So you're in this loop here where you've got to build a product. They want to see it. PowerPoint doesn't cut it anymore. And so you're going to have to go deal with this. And some technical entrepreneur, maybe whoever became the CEO, has to go learn how to sell the idea. And you also need to find more venture capital to go into production. So once you get over those hurdles, well, I got to go find some more money because I want to go into production. But we're in this loop for a while here, and one thing that I've noticed is that when you come in with, if you've built something and you might have funded it on your own dollar, and you come up with some MVP, and it may be just ugly, whatever. The VC will look at that and go, wow, okay, this is good. I understand what you want to do. It's not a PowerPoint presentation. Then it becomes a little more easy to get capital. And so just remember that. Now, I don't know how you do that with software, but because I'm mostly a hardware guy, but it is incredibly hard to fund a hardware company nowadays. And so you have to have a minimum viable product. Now, there's all sorts of ways you can go do this. You can go out and find, people to help you build these things. Maybe you need to 3D print something. You maybe need, blah, blah, blah. You can get some of this stuff done, just outsource it to build this product, and then, go back into the loop again. So that's another kind of interesting piece. And I don't need to probably harp too much more about it, but just remember that all through this here, you're going to ask for venture capital money. You get an A round, a B round, and possibly a C round. And I always say, God forbid you need a D round, but some people get like a C+ round or something. You need a certain amount of capital, and a good amount of capital, especially if you're going to go into production, to make sure that you do it right. And it's non-trivial to go into production, because now you've gone from designing and all this stuff into just slogging out a bunch of product and testing it and having, debugging it and trying to figure out what's going on, why it doesn't, et cetera. And all the time your company's trying to figure out how to monetize it. How am I going to make any money? Because I got to pay the VC back and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to take off your other hat, your hat at the beginning of the formation of the company, and change it to something else. And companies will stumble at this point of trying to get into production because early on they didn't think about, well, what do I have to do to get into production? What do I have to do to my design to make sure I can go into production? And that has happened, and I can't say the name of the company, but it was a company here in town that I went in and started looking at it, and it was pretty obvious. It was part of my Austin Ventures thing, but it's pretty obvious that they were not aware that their idea was not nobody was able to produce it. And they thought that the technology could do it. They obviously didn't look under the covers, and there was no way they're going into production. So this is a big area, big challenge. And last but not least, sort of the last two pieces here. One is keeping your customers. And you go, what does that mean to me? I've got this great idea that, whatever. Well, guess what? Your customers like shiny objects, and there'll be another shiny object somewhere. And so they may be buying your product for a while, then they'll find another shiny object. So you have to have a roadmap. You have to keep your customers interested in you for the long haul, if that's what you want to do, right? Now, the next line here says finding an exit. Can anybody tell me what that means? Finding an exit.
Selling or?
Well, what? Yeah, exactly. All right. So do you want to keep your customers? Well, okay, then you probably don't want an exit, right? But you may find that your skills are not in that area. And so when you get to this point right here, as a technical entrepreneur, you might be better off letting somebody else do this, give them the technology, find an exit of some kind, and then go do it again, because that's what you're good at. So when you get into a company, don't think of it as, it's there, you're there for life kind of thing. What you need to do is bring in somebody that can go take it the rest of the way. Guess what? You get a royalty stream, or you get something good out of it, and you go on and do the next thing. And the next thing is go back up the top of this list here and go work back down again. That makes sense? Sort of, hopefully. Yeah, and exits. So the thing about an exit, having an exit strategy, is the VC want to know what your exit strategy is. Okay, they may not tell you what their exit strategy is, but they're going to want to know what you think you want to do. And if you're in it for the super long haul, you're going to become a regular production company of some kind, then that's fine. They'll be okay. They're going to get their money out of it and walk away anyways. And you may go public and start trading on the stock market or something, and everything's great. I was at Cyrix back in the early 90s. We did that. We went, we did a public offering, and we all, our stock was worth a lot of money and everything was great. And then we started trying to produce everything, and see, it just, like I said, we couldn't produce it because there was some other market pressures in there about going into production, because we didn't own our own fab and what have you. So the exit for Cyrix was they were sold. They were carved up into two pieces and sold. So probably wasn't the exit they wanted, but it happened anyways. So somebody asked a question here. What would you present to VC before developing? Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. You would want to obviously have a mock-up of some kind. You can show them, if you're building a system or something, you can kind of show them, here's what the system is going to look like, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work right now, but this is what we think we're going to go do. That makes sense? I forget who asked that. Manon, I guess you asked that. Yeah. All right. So last but not least, oops, let me go back over here. Oops. This is from Steve. Don't let the noise of other opinions drown out your inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. And anybody who's ever come to me and asked me a question about should I be doing this or I should be doing that or whatever, I always tell them, you know, go hug a tree or something and see what your heart, your intuition says. It turns out that that is a very, very powerful tool as an entrepreneur, because, you know, you got to listen to your kind of inner, you know, inner voice, if you want to call it that. It's kind of what Steve is implicating here. You know, there's something deep down in there that knows what you really want to become and what you need to be doing, and you just have to be able to listen for it. It's incredibly synchronistic, and it's not always inside of you that you have to listen for, but people that you're around when you're putting your company together or you're looking at ideas, you may have a synchronistic event, which means that somebody comes along and tells you something, and that something may be very important to forming your company or what your product is or what you're going to go do. So just think about that. So I want to open up for any final questions.
I think this is a pretty classic question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I'll go for it.
If you could pick like 2 or 3 traits that you think are most important for somebody to be either an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, what would those be?
Well, we could go back to the top 6, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're like personality traits or maybe
personality traits.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you what, I think one of the big ones is that, you know, you have to leave your ego at the door. Okay. You know, yeah, it's your idea and everything else, but you're going to put a team together. You know, leave your ego at the door, which means, you know, that you can't do this by yourself. You have to do it as a team. You know, so if, you know, there's some entrepreneurs that, you know, they have huge egos. I mean, we know about somebody that's moving to Austin has a huge ego, right? Sometimes you have to really watch out for that, because you're not going to find the people you want with that. That's one. Okay. The second one is that you have to remember to always hire the A team. Has anybody heard this before about hiring the A team?
Yeah.
So how does it go? Because I want to see if you know what the A team hires the A team. Okay, what else?
People want to work with A team. Like A team people want to work with other A team caliber people, so they would want to join that team. And it's just a cycle.
But the second piece of that is that the B team hires the C team, because the B team wants to look better than the C team. And so you as an entrepreneur always surround yourself by the A team, right? Especially if in the early days of a startup. And let's see, you asked for 3. What was it? 3 characteristics of whatever. Yep. I think the other one, you know, is you know, you have to be a servant leader. And so what that means is that, especially if you're the founder of the company, your responsibility as a servant leader of the company means that you're there to make everybody successful. And when you do that, when you start thinking of yourself as a servant leader, then they will take care of you at the end of the day. But your job is all about service to everybody in your company, especially if you're at the top of the heap, and pretty much anybody down below too. But that's a trait that's very hard for a lot of people to understand. Some people think they have to be, you know, dictatorial leaders, but you don't. You know, this idea of servant leadership is very powerful. You actually get way more productivity and goodwill out of being a servant leader. Is that what you expected to hear?
Honestly, no. I don't think I've ever heard any of those 3 from when I've asked this question to other people, but they all make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, there's all the other stuff. That's why I joked about going back to the top 6.
Yeah. You know? I like your answer better for sure.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions before we wrap up? Was this worthwhile? Let me ask that. I think you're going to take a survey, right?
Oh, I think we had a question actually from Carla.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, yeah.
I was just asking for like the team part. One of the things you mentioned was like keeping the team.
Yeah.
What is the best way to like keep a team? Because I know mainly we all talked about like finding it and finding the A team, but how is it that you keep those people?
You become a servant leader for one thing. And the second thing you do is you make sure you keep training your team. Training people is one of the best ways to keep people in your organization. They, because when you invest in them, think of people as human capital, right? And nobody thinks of human capital like they should. I'm seeing a little bit more of it in the literature, but human capital means that you invest in human capital, and you don't think of them as a resource that'll walk away, because they're not. They're an asset to the company. They're a huge asset. So you treat them as a huge asset, and people will stay. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. I like that question. Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's time's up. I don't want to go into your next gig here, but thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope everybody had a good time.